After skipping a year, the Electronic Entertainment Expo made its return in grand fashion. Just like the good old days, we have multiple showcases and world premieres. However, not everything was a hit, and even with current events taking their toll on the industry, there are still a few things that stood out as relatively annoying or were just outright hated. Let's take a look at 10 of them here. Before we begin, please consider subscribing and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. With that out of the way, let's get started. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, aka Chaos Reigns. You could point to other titles in Square Enix's showcase as being disliked, but Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy is on top. This is a combination that should have made an immediate impression. Team Ninja of Neo fame working on a hack-and-slash Souls-like set in Final Fantasy I's universe. Plus, it was a surprise announcement. It had to make an impact regardless. It certainly made an impact, and unfortunately, it wasn't what Square Enix had in mind. From the cheesy dialogue to the meme-orific spouting of chaos to the unimpressive aesthetic and blandly designed main character, Stranger of Paradise garnered mixed reactions. And unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. The trial went live on PS5 right after the debut trailer. Surely the gameplay was solid, right? No sooner had fans downloaded it than they discovered the trial was corrupted and wouldn't play. Square Enix would release an update to get it working, and even then impressions have been mixed. From what should have been a bright new debut to a floundering on all fronts, Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin's arrival has been painful to witness. No Final Fantasy 16 or Forspoken. Square Enix's showcase may have been saved if it had a slam dunk showing from a big name. However, neither Final Fantasy 16 nor Forspoken made an appearance, to the extent that neither got an update on their development either. Personally, I thought Life is Strange True Colors looked great, but something bigger was needed to mitigate all the damage that had been caused, and sadly, it just wasn't there. Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster's lackluster announcement. The announcement of Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, which contains remasters for Final Fantasy 1-6, could have replicated that feeling of joy. And while its reveal wasn't outright bungled, it also didn't have much of anything to speak of. The remasters were simply announced, confirmed to be bundled together and sold separately, and then we moved on. No release window, or even confirmation as to whether it would get the HD 2D treatment. It also didn't help that only PC and mobiles were confirmed as the main platforms, which may have not been a big deal in retrospect, but there was hardly anything else to latch onto. Square Enix's mobile announcements. As you might imagine, things were looking grim by the middle of Square Enix's showcase. Stranger of Paradise didn't even have a chance to crash yet. In the midst of all of this, the company devoted some time to showcasing its mobile offerings. These included upcoming updates for War of Visions, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, and Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, along with hyping up the First Soldier, Final Fantasy VII, and Nyar Reincarnation. Your opinions on whether these are good games or not may vary, and their trailers didn't take up lots of time. There was even some positive response to Nyar Reincarnation. However, gacha games like the War of Visions and Brave Exvius simply don't have an audience at the E3, and the First Soldier has been panned since its initial announcement. Combine all of this into the melting pot that was fan rage, and they too faced hefty amounts of dislikes. Showcases with little to showcase. Surely we were past the worst when Square Enix showcase was over. Surely things couldn't sink any lower. As it turns out, they could, not in the sense of bad reveals, but in hyping showcases where very little was actually shown. The Gearbox showcase was more about Randy Pitchford wandering the sets of the Borderlands movie more than anything else. Copious reminders informed the viewer that Homeworld 3 was indeed in production, a little less than 2 years after being announced. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands will have goblins, and Godfall is getting online matchmaking, a PS4 version, and a paid expansion. Yep, that was really it. Bandai Namco was even worse by comparison. After Elden Ring's gameplay was revealed and the title dated for January 2022, one would expect some more details at their showcase. And it's not the only game Bandai Namco is publishing. Tales of Arise and Scarlet Nexus could have been showcased as well. However, it instead featured old footage of the Dark Pictures anthology House of Ashes and a sit-down interview with Supermassive Games. Suffice it to say, it didn't work. And the less said about Koch Media's primetime showcase for its new Prime Matter label, the better, because again, there was very little to actually see and much talking to be had. Capcom's unnecessary showcase. Compared to the other companies, Capcom's E3 2021 showcase was devoted to its more immediate releases like Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin and The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Both looked good, but the former has already seen a number of trailers over the past couple of weeks. Monster Hunter Rise's collaboration announcement also didn't feel like much more than an attempt to market Wings of Ruin. Then there was the announcement that Resident Evil Village would be getting DLC. It just started development though, so there was nothing to see. Despite the company telling fans more or less exactly what to expect, the Capcom showcase just felt like it didn't need to happen. All these reveals were likely meant to be dispersed over the coming weeks, and Capcom felt like packaging them together at E3 2021 just to have a presence. And to take advantage of E3 season hype, of course. Overall, decent news if you're a fan of Monster Hunter and Ace Attorney, but not much else. Still no release date for Halo Infinite. Make no mistake, Microsoft had a pretty good showing for Halo Infinite, even if it didn't focus much more on the campaign and instead debuted gameplay of multiplayer. But there's still time until the release date, right? Except that there was no release date revealed. In fact, 343 Industries could be considered to have slightly delayed the title, going from a fall 2021 window to a holiday 2021 window, which still could be November for all we know. More details continue to emerge about multiplayer and it's looking strong, but the lack of a release date, especially after Halo Infinite's been delayed for a year and is one of the marquee titles that Xbox needs, is concerning. Microsoft's missing games. You could argue that Microsoft had way too many games for its showcase and did well to leave out a few. But when the games being left out are State of Decay 3, Everwild, which is rumored to have been rebooted, and Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, it doesn't paint the brightest picture. Yes, these titles were mentioned, and Hellblade 2 did get a making of montage and an update at a separate showcase. There are also a number of great additions announced for Xbox Game Pass, and titles like Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl, and Forza Horizon 5 had pretty great showings. But with no real clue as to when so many of the already announced big exclusives are actually releasing, the immediate future of first-party games on Xbox is still looking kind of iffy. Lack of details for Breath of the Wild sequel. Nintendo's E3 Direct was thankfully a big step up over many of the others, packed with big game reveals, returning franchises like Metroid, and some new gameplay for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel. And while it did look nice, it was also fairly brief, roughly 87 seconds in total. This was after the title was announced 2 years ago and no further details, be it the name or story, have been revealed. Not to hate on what was showcased, I just expected a bit more. That 2022 at the end of the trailer also sadly doesn't mean much when you consider that games are being delayed all the time. See God of War sequel. No Switch games or campaigns for Zelda's 35th anniversary. Series producer Eiji Aonuma did reveal afterwards that no other Zelda projects or campaign are in the works to celebrate its 35th anniversary, aside from Skyward Sword HD and the Game & Watch device. Now, rumors still indicate that the Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD are very much coming, but even if they weren't, reactions to this lack of celebration for the Zelda fans have ranged from disappointment to hostility. It's weird, especially since the series is very much alive and well, but somewhat understandable at the end of the day. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and we would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.